Hi, and welcome back to Next Chapter Woman. In the last few videos, I've been apologizing for my austere background here as I'm in between a decorated space and an undecorated space. And so I'm going through the realities of it's not quite done yet, but I know it's going to be done someday. And as I was preparing for today's episode, I was thinking, what a comparison that is between that not ready yet and I'm ready, or decorated and not decorated. The feeling that there's a lot of similarities. That space between what we know and what we don't know, that space between the now and what's next. So I still apologize for the austereness of my background, but it will get better as the decorating renovation proceeds. So, there's a season in life that people don't talk about very much. It's that space that's between the chapters. Not the chapter you just finished and not the chapter that's coming next, but the quiet middle part. The part where something in your life has clearly changed, but the new shape of things hasn't really appeared yet. You're not exactly who you were, but you're not entirely sure who you're becoming either. And I've been realizing lately that this middle space may be one of the most important parts of the whole journey. So maybe we need to recognize the in-between. When we think about life stories, we tend to imagine them in clean chapters: childhood, adulthood, family life, career, retirement, as if one chapter closes neatly and the next one begins. But real life rarely moves that cleanly, does it? Most transitions include a period that feels, unfinished. A space where things are shifting and changing, but they're not settled. Where the old rhythm has changed, but the new rhythm hasn't fully arrived. Like the space that's around me. The old is out, but the new hasn't had time to come in yet. And that in-between space can feel surprisingly disorienting. You might recognize this feeling. You wake up one day and realize something in your life has changed. Maybe the responsibilities that once filled your days have changed. Maybe relationships have evolved, or maybe the structure of your life looks different than it once did. Nothing's necessarily wrong, but something is clearly different. So you find yourself standing in a kind of middle ground. You're not lost, but you're not fully put together, not fully oriented either. One of the things I've been noticing is how quickly we expect clarity to arrive after life changes. We think, once this situation changes, I'll know what comes next. But often that isn't how it works. Life shifts first, and understanding comes later. And the time between those two things can feel, it can feel very uncomfortable. That's because we like clear direction. We like knowing what chapter we're in. But the in-between period asks us to live without that certainty for just a while. The more I sit with this idea and think about it and live in it, the more I've begun to see that the space between chapters isn't a mistake in the story. It's part of the story. It's the part where reflection begins, the part where old assumptions start to loosen up, and the part where we begin to notice things about ourselves that we didn't have time to see before. When those structures begin to change, something unexpected happens to us. We gain a little more space to think. And that space can be both uncomfortable and very valuable. Something else I've been realizing is that the next chapter of life doesn't always arrive all at once. It reveals itself gradually through small decisions, through quiet observations, through moments where we notice what feels meaningful now compared to what used to feel meaningful before. And that unfolding process takes time. We might not realize the new chapter while we're standing in the middle of it. Often we only see it clearly later on when we look back. One thing that matters to me in these conversations is remembering that the earlier chapters of life were not mistakes. They mattered. The responsibilities we carried, the roles we filled, people we showed up for, those things shaped us. They gave meaning to large parts of our lives, so the space between chapters isn't about rejecting what came before. It's about carrying that history forward while life gradually reshapes itself. It's a transition, not an erasure. So the middle space teaches something many of us aren't used to practicing: patience with uncertainty, living for a while without a fully defined path, not rushing to force the next chapter into existence before it's ready, just noticing, just listening, allowing life to shift at its own pace. And that can be surprisingly difficult for people who have spent years being responsible for keeping things moving along. Several of the conversations here on my channel explore this experience of living between chapters. If this idea hits home with you, you might also enjoy some of the other episodes in the playlist called The Space Between Chapters. They explore different parts of this transition: the uncertainty, the quiet adjustments, and the gradual way a new stage of life begins to take shape. For many people, this middle season turns out to be one of the most thoughtful and transformative parts of the journey. So, if you find yourself in a moment where life looks a little unfinished, where something has clearly shifted, but the next chapter hasn't fully appeared yet, you might simply be standing in the space between the chapters. While that space can feel uncertain at times, it also holds something important. It holds room for reflection, room for perspective, room for the next part of your story to unfold gradually rather than all at once. And sometimes the quiet middle of the story is exactly where we begin to understand what the next chapter is really meant to be. So, as always, please enjoy this chapter of your life story. Make space for reflection and for perspective, and enjoy your journey. Bye for now.